Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Going Live with Good Soil. Matt is back from his break. Last week, Dave Lee helped out and co-hosted with me, and so Matt and I are back. And how's it going, Matt? How was your week off? Was it nice?
Good. Yeah, it was nice. My brother was in town with his family, so always good to catch up with those you love and don't get to see too often. So no, it was nice. And
Good.
Dave did some good pinch hitting while I was out, and really liked his perspective on some things too. So we'll probably
Yeah.
pick up some of those themes as we get going this week.
Yeah. So as usual, we start talking about like kind of macro market thread topics and such, and then we kind of move into Tesla latest stuff and some other market portfolio stock stuff, and then we take questions for the last half of the hour. So if you have questions, we already have a few lined up from Twitter and a few submitted in other ways. So any other questions you have, feel free to submit it on the live stream here. And we have Alec behind the scenes kind of collecting them, and we'll present them later. So in terms of the macro markets, though, I mean, since last week, there's more talk of this infrastructure bill getting close to pass, and there's some like crypto, a lot of pushback from the crypto world of some of the language in here. I mean, what's your take on that, Matt?
Yeah, this is crazy. I remember using when we used to think that it was crazy that there'd be like $400 billion bills that get pushed through Congress, but now we're in the trillions and nobody bats an eye anymore. So I mean
Yeah,
that's kind of one crazy thing just on the surface level. But yeah, for those who have maybe heard but don't know the details of this crypto thing, there is some language in this infrastructure bill that essentially requires that anyone involved in almost any aspect of the crypto value stream to be treated for regulatory purposes within the United States as a essentially as like a broker. So like Coinbase, we all are familiar with. There's a couple others that actually are registered. They collect KYC, your client
yeah.
information
And real quick,
among.
I can tell you guys from my experience in the brokerage world, it is no fun if you are registered as a broker with the regulators. Like you have to jump through so many hoops and bounds, all the time from a compliance standpoint, just to keep your registration up to date. There's just audit possibility. There's just so many
Mhm.
headaches that go along with that. So anyway, go on, Matt.
Yeah, so I mean, it's a fair point. It's basically a big reporting requirement. A lot of infrastructure needed to do that role properly. But this language was essentially just incredibly poorly written, and I'm not sure if that was on purpose or if it's just that these senators don't know what they're talking about.
Probably the
But
latter.
essentially, it's probably the latter. But it wouldn't surprise me if there's some like bank lobbying dollars that are kind of going in here, kind of
Sure.
hoping it'll clip the wings of the crypto community. But
Yeah.
the way that it's written right now, essentially, crypto miners, people trading NFTs, anything at all would be treated as if they were a broker. So they would be required to collect information on customers as if they were a broker, which frankly just doesn't even make sense. I mean, if you're just mining Bitcoin with a server somewhere, you don't know who your counterparties are. There's no information really to gather. But
Yeah.
this law, this legislation, or it's not a law, it's a bill that looks like it's poised to pass the Senate right now. So
Yeah.
it's really just a completely nonsensical bit of language that should have been severely cut back or just probably just taken out of the bill since it has nothing to do with infrastructure to begin with.
Sure.
Um, but so there was a decent amount of lobbying from the crypto community. Jack was tweeting about it. Jack Dorsey was tweeting about it on Twitter. Lots of folks just saying, contact your senators to get this out of the bill. And looks like the Senate just decided, nah, we're not going to let this hold it up. We're just going to try to pass the bill as is. So
Yeah, we're gonna steamroll the
that's
bill through. Yeah.
that's kind of where it stands. I don't know the odds of it passing. I mean, I think
I mean,
there
just
needs to be
enforcing,
reconciliation.
I feel like enforcing what they're trying to require is going to be more expensive than any kind of tax savings they're going to get. It's one of those crazy
Uh,
things.
it's not enforceable. Like I think
Yeah.
any kind of challenge
They're
that
gonna have
would
to
come
create
up
like a
in.
new watchdog agency just to try to enforce it, and then it's gonna be so expensive just to like check on every crypto miner of like they're
Yeah,
doing their proper registration. It's just gonna be it's one of
you
those
could
things
like
where the government's just getting bigger, and it's just this is
I
totally
honestly don't think
terrible.
I'm certainly no legal scholar, but I cannot imagine if this somehow got passed, you know, it was reconciled with the House bill, which still needs to happen before it's signed
Yeah,
into law. But if that was somehow passed as is written, I cannot imagine that particular provision would stand up to a court challenge because it's
yeah,
completely impractical. I mean, what would well, let's say you're a minor who's trying to comply with that and say, okay, I've got this block. I need to,
yeah,
um, mine. So who
yeah.
would you even go to for the KYC? Like if like
I don't even
what would
know.
you actually be able to do to
Yeah,
show like good faith compliance with the law? So I have to imagine, even if this does somehow pass the Senate, which it
yeah,
very well may, I can't imagine it would become law as it's currently written because
yeah,
it's nonsensical, and I have too much faith in
yeah,
the courts that that wouldn't
yeah.
help. But
It's
still, it's
pretty
kind of a
clear.
concern, and
Yeah, I mean, it's very clear that the senators, they're a different generation by and large, and they do not understand technology. Like every once in a while, I see Zuckerberg and Jack Dorsey or something go up to get questioned by the Senate on things. And most of the senators ask, like, these are the senators that are supposed to be specialists in those areas. And they ask the questions, and some of them are just comical. Like, so what is the internet with social media? They just throw key buzzwords out and like ask ridiculous questions, and that shows they don't understand anything. And maybe a couple of the senators do, but the majority of them, in my mind, don't understand technology at all compared to like the
you're
crypto world.
You're completely right. I mean, we really need some forward-looking regulations. Yeah, I tried to watch a little bit of the hearing on
Yeah,
this. I think it was yesterday,
yeah.
and it was like impossible to actually listen to it because like every senator would just
Oh
come
my
up and
gosh.
talk about whatever they wanted to talk about. So like, it wasn't actually a debate of like the merits of the bill
Yeah,
or like of trying to
typical
understand crypto any
politicians.
better. It was
Yeah.
like, here's my pet position, and I'm gonna like list a bunch of statistics off to you about like how great the economy is in West Virginia or wherever they're like.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
just
yeah,
it's so sad to watch this kind of
yeah.
happen in real time.
Yeah,
But I
I
think
mean,
you're
I
right.
think
I think
politicians, new politicians should be forced to go through some kind of regulatory, registration or something that shows that they have some understanding of technology. Like we have new politicians coming in all the time that are old and like, not that old is bad. There's my dad knows a lot about, he knows more about some technologies than I do, but a lot of older people in like their 60s and 70s or 50s, 60s, 70s, they just don't understand this stuff whatsoever. And I don't have a good understanding of it. I admit, if I was going to go into some kind of lawmaking role, I would certainly study up very carefully the technology aspects of whatever I'm legislating. Like it just seems like these people aren't doing that, or they're trying, but they just don't have the capability.
yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it's frankly, you don't have as much of an obligation because you're not crafting regulations that will
Yeah.
impact the future development of cryptocurrency. But like
Crazy.
it's kind of sad because I mean, you look at what China did 2 months ago or whatever, and all the Bitcoin miners are essentially forced to kind of leave that country,
Mm,
and now you could have a similar sort of pressure to move a lot of like this promising new portion of the economy, to like essentially offshore a lot of the development of this this like really important new feature of the financial system. Just like, yeah, you know what, the United States doesn't want to have anything to do with that. We're going to kind of stick to credit
yeah.
cards and banks and our
Yeah.
ancient ACH system, which takes like 3 days to process like money transfers. And
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
kind of crazy, yeah, like how antiquated the current financial system is, and moves like this to stifle innovation in the United States. I think it's pretty sad.
Yeah. No, it
And we're
is.
not
It
by any
is.
means like Bitcoin maximalists or cryptocurrency maximalists. I think there's a lot of
No,
debate
we're
and
not.
discussion that should happen. I don't think you're going to see Emmett and I have laser eyes in our profile anytime soon.
No, definitely not. Yeah, yeah. No, I mean, I think I feel a little bad for the people whose majority of their portfolio is crypto, just because there's so much uncertainty going on with it right now with this, and it's probably nerve-wracking, So I feel a little bad, um, and we'll see how things shake out. This price is still going up despite this uncertainty, but it's a global thing, crypto. It's not just a US based thing. So maybe that's proving out here. So in other news, kind of like the Delta variant, any kind of updates on that on your end, Matt? I mean, I still think we're a couple weeks behind, maybe 3 weeks behind the UK and Israel, or and UK sort of come back down. So I'm thinking the next week or two we'll probably see the biggest areas, whether it's Florida, Texas, or wherever, start dropping. That's my expectation, but I don't know. What are your thoughts, man?
Yeah, same. I've seen the chart that showed kind of the recent peak. I think the peak of new cases in the UK was last week, if I'm not mistaken, and it's kind of come down since then. So I certainly hope that's the case, and then we'd continue to see that trend. And that is my expectation. I think a lot of people have probably been talking to death about this, but from my perspective, it does seem to kind of be following the trajectory that we had been expecting, where it's something to keep an eye on, but it looks like it's not going to be anything close to kind of the worst case scenario predictions that were out there.
News headlines just love to go wild with this stuff, though. They get so many clicks. It's crazy. So we're just going to see crazy news headlines as long as possible on it. So I have to remind myself of that. It doesn't mean it's not going to be serious or not going to be really bad, but no matter what, I'm going to see really worrisome headlines, even if it's not so bad. I just have to know that. So yeah. And also there's a guy I follow that I feel like has been really a lot, like there's certain people you follow or you learn to trust, like Sam
Corus from Mark?
Like for crypto, there's a guy that runs the FTX exchange, Sam Brinkman-Friedman, and he was talking about, he was on an Odd Lots podcast for Bloomberg's Odd Lots podcast last week, and he was talking about Tether and all the uncertainties around, because that's been a hot topic lately. Conspiracy theorists talking about Tether being a possible scandal, but he went on the record on Odd Lots and talked for a half hour about it. And this guy I trust way more than any YouTubers who are trying to get clicks and extra views about conspiracy theories. So that's a signal guy that I listen to for crypto stuff. And then for the Delta variant or for COVID stuff, a signal guy I like to trust is this guy, Scott Gottlieb. I'm sure a lot of people watching are familiar with his name. He's on CNBC a lot, but he tweets a lot. And he's like on the board of Pfizer. He's been spot on with, I feel like, his reporting of what's going on with COVID. And he's pretty confident that this is probably the last wave of COVID, and it's going to be quick and fast, and we're probably a few weeks behind the UK. And he's, for the last 6 or 9 months, I've been following him. He seems to be pretty spot on stuff. So that's, people are always asking, like, who do you follow, Emmet? Or, but, for COVID stuff, the guy Scott Gottlieb's pretty good.
Yeah, I'll have to add him to my list. He's one I have not been following, but I think it's so important to curate those reliable sources of kind of unbiased information. It's so hard to make sense just based on the headlines or reading articles these days. You really do have to kind of look at the track record and kind of discern the data for yourself. It's crazy how far we've fallen in terms of the quality of the press in just the last 15, 20 years.
Yeah, I mean, separating the signal from the noise is like more important than ever now. But that also gives us, I think, our edge in investing. Like if you can do that, you can invest well and have a very good performance. I mean, that's what our business is about, investing well, and we're doing our best to kind of separate the signal from the noise. And sometimes the herd can be right, but a lot of times it's not, and you have to kind of do something that seems unpopular or invest in something that seems unpopular at the time or whatnot.
Yeah. So speaking of, kind of the concerns of the herd, I think one of the things that was making a lot of noise earlier this year was inflation concerns. Those seem to have eased for the most part. And, Kathy Wood, I think, was one of the big, proponents of deflation being a bigger factor going forward than inflation. And she would point to Wright's law and essentially the cost of software coming down and manufacturing of complex products coming down. And then I think it was just last week, but recently, like the Nissan Leaf, which is not my favorite car by any stretch, but it's maybe a good ballpark to gauge this sort of deflationary force that she's been talking about for a long time now. The new 2022 version, I think it is, that was just introduced, has an MSRP of, I think it's around $27,000, which is, I think, really amazing. Yeah, $27,400 is the new starting MSRP. I mean, that used to be, I believe, a $40,000 car. Maybe it was slightly lower than that. So just in a couple of years, you've seen the cost of that come down, pretty substantially. That's certainly just one product. It's not indicative of the entire economic system, but I think for new technologies in particular, and for electric vehicles, this is certainly relevant for our investment thesis in Tesla. The ability to lower the manufacturing cost to therefore lower the price to gain more market share, I think is going to be critically important, and I think it's maybe an aspect that a lot of the detractors don't kind of assume. They sort of assume you're going to have 1% to 3% inflation every year in your cost structure, rather than more than that on the deflationary side. So kind of interesting to see these data points come out that are supporting a deflationary thesis.
Yeah, I think the inflation is going to be a fear thrown around, especially by gold buggers, and they try to carry it forward to Bitcoin and so forth. And I honestly think we're going to kind of be flirting with the edge of inflation for years to come. It's going to be talked about. It'll never really happen. Interest rates will never really go up more than a couple hundred basis points at most, in my opinion. So I think we're kind of in this new era where, mortgage rates of, 10% will never happen again. I remember, when I was a kid, interest rates were something, it was like a whole different dimension, imagining to live in like interest rate eras of like 15% or something. Like I can't, like back then you put your money in a savings account. Yeah, I'm going to earn interest, now, no way, you don't earn any interest. Who does that? No one, so yeah, it's a different era, and inflation, like you said, with the Nissan Leaf lowering their price, I think it's like 27,000 now for their 40 kilowatt, and even their 62.5 kilowatt or something is like 31,000 starting price, and that's before they're still eligible for the $7,500 incentive that the U.S. Way back that Tesla ran out of a long time ago. So you can get a new Nissan Leaf for like $20,000. That's a great commuter car, that goes 160 miles or something. So that's just proof of inflation, I think, versus deflation, like you said. Technology is increasing at such a rate that it crosses off any inflationary risk overall, in my opinion, too.
Yeah, I think monetary policy is certainly kind of putting pressure the other way. But to me, it does just seem that we're in a new kind of era of investing. That probably the return profile in the next 10 years is not going to be the historic 7% a year that I learned in finance school.
No,
business
it should
school.
probably be like 10 or 12 or more. I don't know. It'll be something.
Well, I don't know. Maybe on average it still is, but I think you're gonna have a lot of legacy businesses suffer and not make it, and you'll have on the other end a lot of businesses that'll 10, 20, 50x in a decade, which you probably wouldn't have been the case before. But there's so much more value being created, especially with trends like AI. Just increasing the entire pie of society,
AI,
just creating value.
Yeah, speaking of that, we have, one quick thing is this Huawei, is that how you pronounce it? They have their self-driving car price. Huawei, yeah, that's right. I keep thinking Hawaii because you spell it a little bit like that. But Huawei, they have their new car. I saw it posted by a few, Taylor Oregon or someone posted the specs. I don't know. Has anyone verified that? That looks incredible. What the offering is. It's like what, 30-something thousand bucks for like a full self-driving, 200+ mile EV.
Yeah, I'm not sure the full specs on it. And I think they're using HD map, so it's not clearly what Tesla's trying to do. But yeah, it's certainly an impressive vehicle. I think there's a lot of innovation in this front coming out of China. And I think it's something that warrants watching closely. I think there's kind of an easy default position that we can have as Tesla enthusiasts, that Tesla's going to kind of take over the world, and they'll be the #1 electric car in the U.S., Europe, and China, and everywhere else. But there's, I think, serious competition. I think a lot of the best manufacturers and designers of EVs are actually in China right now, and there's some competitors here that are serious. I think like Rivian, but I think the ones to watch.
Matt has some pretty good credentials for opinions on China versus most of the rest of us. I mean, you studied China a lot. Did you live there for a while too, or something, or you just went over
Uh,
there? I don't know.
yeah, so I've studied Chinese language for a long time. Actually, I have a degree in East Asian language and culture, but it was it was really just
Wow.
studying Chinese language. So yeah, I've been over to China quite a few times. I did a summer abroad there when I was
So
in college studying the language.
you're as close as I can get to boots on the ground in China. You were boots on the ground previously in
It's
China, but not
yeah,
anymore. But
previously, but
still, you
yeah,
have a good understanding, at least based on that versus me.
I've forgotten a lot of the language that I used to know, and
I'm sure things
it's
change.
yeah. I mean, the pace of change there is absolutely crazy. I mean, I was actually there in 1999 when they were building the Three Gorges Dam, and But this is a bit of an aside, but it was just crazy. Like all these villages that were poor, and they had these watermarks kind of lined up of like, here's where the water
Wow.
is going to be, and all these ancient temples were just going to be underwater, and it was just
Wow.
kind of crazy to see this vast area of the country that was just going to be gone. And seeing the country back then compared to what it is now, I mean, it's just the pace of GDP growth and of people coming up out of poverty there has been absolutely remarkable. And they've got,
Yeah.
I think we used to think of them, maybe 10 years ago as basically stealing technology and not being able to innovate. But
Yeah.
they're doing a lot of innovation right now that I think
Yeah.
warrants some serious consideration and not just writing it off as it's just cheap Chinese products.
Yeah.
That's just not the case
And,
anymore.
and what is Elon's quote about government? He's like, government is just a corporation to the limit, or a company to the limit, or something,
Yeah,
right?
in the limit
So,
size. Yeah,
so when you think about the U.S. government at this point, like you can see it with evidence of what we talked about with the infrastructure bill and the crypto regulations they're trying to pass. They just don't know what the heck they're doing. It's just a bunch of chefs in the kitchen, like misguided, not really understanding. In China, you get the feeling that that's a corporation to a limit that might even have a higher limit, but at least you have like people that have a direction and know they can efficiently move in that direction versus like so many people cross-fighting and not understanding what they're doing. I feel like in China, there's at least a better sense of direction that they can go in if when they want to. Like I don't know if that the U.S. has like
yeah,
anyone that can direct it. It's just kind of its own enigma, kind of free flowing into like, and China, you just have kind of like the centralized control, which is good and bad. Like freedom of speech, that's bad. Over there, but in other ways, it's really good. Like with innovation and bringing about more EVs in the country, and there's a lot of good things about it that people kind of in the U.S. at least in Western
yeah.
culture seem to dismiss.
It's a really good point, and one I think most people don't take enough time to really think through. The U.S. is not perfect, and China is definitely not perfect. I'm not saying that at all.
Yeah.
I don't think we can excuse a lot of the human rights violations that have occurred there. But there is just a difference where, like you were saying, here in the U.S., if like we're trying to handle crypto policy, the executive branch may have one view of things, the legislative branch may have another, and the judicial is a whole bunch of different people. So
Yeah.
you can have the government fighting with itself, whereas in China, I mean, all the power essentially flows from the Chinese Communist Party, and really from Xi Jinping, who's kind of at the head of that. But even before his time, his predecessors were thinking in terms of decades and generations, and kind of laying a groundwork to gradually lift up the country and improve the economic prospects, and just really improve the China's standing on the world stage. I'm
Yeah.
listening to a great book right now. I would recommend to people who want to know a little bit more about it. It's called Destined for War by Graham Allison. And it basically kind of compares and contrasts like US values and Western values with Chinese values. And it asks the question, are two countries destined to fight each other and have a giant clash of nations, which I don't think they are. But it's a really helpful framework I'd recommend people listen to or read, just to get a better understanding of kind of what drives Chinese values, because I think we have a tendency here in the United States to assume that our values are universal and are right. And this book has been really helpful for me, even though I did have a decent background in Chinese culture, to understand the Chinese values and not just say they're better or worse, but just to understand how they think. So I think that's really valuable to understand kind of who or the different ways that people can think about complex topics.
Yeah, no, it's good.
So, bit of an aside there, but
Yeah.
I think
So
it
let's
is
talk
worth
about
people understanding.
I think what most people follow us for or like to hear is our insights on Tesla, and so let's go into the Tesla part of the chat. And I guess AI Day is next Thursday. I'm really bummed. I'm going to be on another family vacation starting that day with my family, so I probably won't be able to watch it live, unfortunately. I'm bummed, but I'll watch a recording like later that night after my kids are in bed and stuff. But I'm excited. I'm super stoked. I mean, AI Day, I put out a tweet like a week ago or something that like, what if there's a demo of like a humanoid robot driving a Tesla car, like, a self-driving Tesla car nonetheless, sort of as like a stunt, like a demo stunt, just show like how crazy this can get. And in a way, it's like a sense of humor thing, like, because there's, someone has to occupy the driver's seat of a car for it to drive. And there's arguments about whether AI should have rights or not at some point. So like you could say, hey, well, what about a humanoid robot that has rights? Could they sit in the front seat of a car and let it drive? So I don't know. I just feel like it could be a funny thing, but I doubt they do that. I just threw that idea out there, but a lot of people retweeted it and stuff. People are like, you're crazy. That's not going to happen. People took it like serious, like I was like seriously predicting it, but I'm just throwing it out like as a weird, crazy thing. But what do you think is going to happen at AID, man? What do you think?
Yeah, so the surprise for me is that there does appear to be something of a focus on robotics.
Yes.
So when I think of AI, I tend to kind of think of like a disembodied AI that's just incredibly smart at whatever the application is, and can handle superhuman tasks, but doesn't need to manipulate the physical world around to do that. But a lot of the indications we're kind of getting from the lab, I forget that guy's name, who appears to be working with
Hung Kim or something. Yeah.
yeah, I can't remember,
Yeah.
but
From
so he's got a
UCLA
robotics lab
yeah.
at UCLA, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and appears to be working with Tesla, and so that's kind of surprising to me. Clearly, the most directly applicable AI that we can think of is going to be the self-driving, which you wouldn't need a robot to handle. I mean, like
Yeah.
the car can already turn the wheel. You don't
Yeah, of
necessarily
course.
need the robot
Yeah.
to do that. So yeah, no, I did take yours with a grain of salt.
Yeah.
But like there could be applications such as like charging, like you need to physically charge, like
Yeah.
plug in the thing.
Some
If we're gonna
little
have,
robot to go around and unplug and replug people at the charging network. So you have like a free gas station attendant, but not that, the charging attendant, sort of.
yeah, exactly. So you could have some sort of attendant like that, and maybe down the road that could be used for cleaning the vehicles as well.
Yeah.
But and then on top of that, Tesla talks a lot about manufacturing being the sustainable. Somebody put Dennis Hong is his name. Sorry.
Dennis Hong, yeah.
Somebody, I forget what I was saying, but the robotics that they use for manufacturing, those are, the machine that builds the machine is Elon's view of Tesla's long-term sustainable advantage. So I think optimizing that whole process of manufacturing can go a really long way towards what Tesla's doing. And then the other thing I haven't heard a lot of people talk about, which Tesla's already doing, is on the like auto bidder, for example. But I also have a background in energy and was bidding power plants into the wholesale markets, and those prices change every 5 minutes, and you can go. I've seen it happen in real-time markets where your prices can go from like negative $30 to positive $400 per megawatt hour in like a 5 minute span. And
Yeah.
like the systems that the energy industry has in place to deal with that are dumb, and they typically take like 30 minutes to react to. Like if you're going to spin a gas turbine up or down based on price signals, it takes a while. Coal,
Yeah.
solid fuel takes even longer. Wind turbines take 20 minutes or so. So it's really hard to react in real time, and batteries combined with artificial intelligence are a really smart way to kind of handle those inefficiencies in the market and react in real time. But there's a whole more beyond there that I can't even speculate on. Like I really just can't wait to see what they say, because it's hard to imagine.
There's so many great utilizations of the real world AI, which I think of as like somewhat interplay with robotics. That's the reality. Physical world is you need some kind of robot or mechanical thing, in the real world. It's not just virtual AI. So, but I think because we know that AI Day is more of the main purpose is recruiting the next generation of, machine learners, neural network experts, robotics people and so forth. I think he's going to put some kind of demo together or some kind of vision that captures the imagination of these young folks getting into the industry. And we're all excited about like Star Wars type stuff or, science fiction type stuff. So there's gonna be something really cool demoed. I mean, whatever is demoed, I don't imagine being like maybe like a serious mass production thing, but maybe just some kind of like thing to capture everyone's imagination so that like it attracts a lot more talent to be like, well, Tesla's doing some cool stuff. Let's go over there. Let's work there, So
Yeah.
that's kind of my feeling, that the demo might not be something that's going to be like mass produced in any way, but it might be just something like a circus trick almost, but like more than it, not just a circus, like circus trick is kind of negative connotation. Like I'm saying like something that's like just shows the capability of this type of technology and what it's going to be doing.
Yeah, I think you're right, but I also think that I remember when Autonomy Day came around, I didn't really have a good framework for how to think of Tesla's goals in autonomy. And then after that event, I was like, my mind was blown. I was like, oh, I totally understand what they're trying to do and why. And I think it's logical and it makes sense. And they'll be able to execute on that path and eventually reach that goal. Right now, I kind of feel about their AI goals like I did about autonomy. It's like, yeah, they should do something there, but it's not
what is it?
completely clear to me, like how that helps the company or like what it will look like. So I'm really hoping that there's some sort of framework we can take out of that hopefully we'll understand and Wall Street will dismiss or
a clear vision that
that
Elon presents. I would hopefully there's something good there. Yeah, I think he's done that in almost all his major presentations. I think back to that Tesla Energy. I don't know if you remember the Powerwall reveal years ago.
Yeah, I watched it again recently, a couple months ago.
That was really good because it presented a clear vision of like the first time I put it together, like, oh, you have the biggest nuclear fusion reactor in the sky. Why don't we take advantage of it? And this is how we take advantage of it and power the Earth, with batteries so that, it was the first time that all clicked with me, and that's coming true, now. So we'll see what he presents here and hopefully it clicks with a lot of people.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Any kind of Tesla stock catalyst for the rest of this year that you see, man? Anything? I mean, we talk about this. We beat this horse dead every week, but it's good to update it every week. Not everyone watches every week, but things change. Any updated? What are your thoughts?
I think expectations of any sort of production coming out of Berlin and Texas have been largely discounted by people. So I think if it's possible that they get even just like a couple bodies in white or just a couple parts of the production line up and running, I think that would be a really positive takeaway. The other kind of rumor, and I don't want to give this more airtime than it deserves because I'm not really sure if it's true, but there's been some talk within the Tesla community that Tesla has actually designed the $25,000 car and that it might launch this year.
Wow. Mm-hmm.
So I personally think that's unlikely. I don't think they would have been able to design and get a prototype together that quickly. I could be wrong, but I think if they did, that could be taken really well. But my sense is they probably that won't happen because they don't want to cannibalize existing sales. So I don't know. I've heard people talk about 4680 and a couple others. My sense is that the market's not going to give Tesla credit for 4680 until it actually shows up in the financials as improved gross margin. I could be wrong about that, but to me, 4680 is the sort of thing that us Tesla nerds like love and are super obsessed with, but that your average Wall Street analyst, or investor just really doesn't care about. It's like, oh, we got a different battery, cool. Don't really understand, how much of an impact it makes. But it also seems like they're behind on that. So how about you? Any catalysts in your mind that seem to be weighing more heavily?
Yeah. I mean, I think this infrastructure bill, if it gets passed later in the fall for the $10,000 EV credit in the US, that's like unlimited demand in the US pretty much. I think that'll boost all the EV stocks, 10 to 30% almost overnight, like within a week or a few days or something. So I think that's a nice catalyst. I do think the production, I don't see any surprises in production numbers. It seems like Troy's forecasting like 230,000, 225,000 for Q3 and maybe 240 for Q4, which is nice. It's a nice incremental increase, but there's no like bump of 100,000 suddenly one quarter to the next, So,
Yeah.
I think that's good, but I think the big catalyst could be next year when Giga, Texas, and Berlin start meaningfully contributing. I think the Cybertruck, and the full self-driving, obviously beta, obviously. So the next release supposedly should be this Friday night. And I think I heard Elon mention that like, this next release is tight or something. And that like somewhere it was mentioned that like this next release is the first one with feedback from the first release taken into effect. The second release didn't really have feedback from the first release. It just had some improvements that the Autopilot team had been working on. But
which is why it took 3 weeks rather than 2.
Yeah. So this one could be like marginally better than the improvement than the first to second. The second to third could be a bigger step change, I'm wondering. So if that happens, to me, that's like a real bullish sign to like, later in the year, it's going to be really good.
Did you see? It looks like it's going to be labeled 2024 dot whatever version of it. I've seen a couple people tweet that out. I'm not sure if that's 100% true, but like if that's the case, like that's I would say a bullish signal that they're able to iterate rapidly. Because I think I watched a lot of the videos from the whatever the first version of it was that the beta testers got to the second one 2 weeks later, and there were some improvements, but I also saw it doing a lot of the things that are highly dangerous, creeping up and taking a left really slowly into oncoming traffic and that sort of thing, which which is why you have this in beta right now and not in wide release. So if they can kind of get rid of like those horrible disaster kind of decisions that the software seems to be making right now, I think that'd be a huge step up.
Yeah, I agree. So full self-driving beta is the #1 potential catalyst, when that really makes a step change and clear. And whether that's this year, next year, it's hard to say, but or the year after, I don't know. But that's the big one. Other than that, the infrastructure bill and Cybertruck, when that starts coming out to market, which looks like it's gonna be next year. So those are exciting things.
I think continued operating margin too. I mean, I think Q2 we had amazing gross margin numbers.
Yes,
and that was really before a lot of those orders would have been placed like in Q1 before the price increases took effect. And so I think you're gonna and before the Model S was up and running. So I think you could have some more earnings beats coming up in Q3 and Q4 in particular. So I'm kind of curious to see how that unfolds as well. I think that could be a catalyst, just continued financial performance.
Yeah. And we had a couple other topics we were thinking about talking about, like Roblox, but their earnings is Monday, so we can talk more about them next Tuesday maybe, and some other stuff. But let's leave some time for question and answers, if you don't mind, Matt. Maybe Alec can start putting up some questions. Or do you have anything else you want to chat about before we go to some questions?
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I mean, we've been talking a lot about Tesla, but we certainly, you and I know, have been digging in on other companies' names. But yeah, let's open it up to questions, and this does not have to be a Tesla only conversation.
Yeah, for sure. From B4YN on Twitter, wondering what your thoughts are on Lemonade regarding not having a timeline on auto insurance. I mean, that does concern me a little bit. I'm sure there's a lot of regulatory pressures. I believe you listened to the earnings call, Matt, right?
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts on the auto insurance rollout? I mean, it seems like it's probably more complicated than any other insurance they offer right now.
Yeah, I think it is complicated. So for those who maybe are not following it as closely, they released what I thought were pretty good numbers. I mean, they were reasonably in line. They're pretty much exactly in line with the revenue and the earnings estimates that Wall Street had out there. But the stock dropped 10%, I think, the next day. So the market seemed to not really like it. Seems a little bit oversold to me. But essentially, from an operational perspective, what they were saying is that when they launch these new product lines, so like home insurance is the big new one that they've launched. It takes them a while to really kind of fine tune the underwriting that they're doing. So, they've got a very highly automated kind of process for assessing risk and for, pricing individual policies to individual consumers. So they've been able to kind of fine tune that with the renters, which is kind of their bread and butter insurance right now, and keep the loss ratios down.
what they saw when they introduced the home insurance is that the loss ratios were a little bit higher. But the commentary in the earnings call was that, as they introduce these new products, and have more experience underwriting them and seeing the claims come in, their expectation is that the loss ratios will come down, and to kind of towards the normalized level that they're seeing in the renters business, which is the most mature model or business line. So I think, if they were to shoot out right now with an auto business, they'd probably have the similar sort of issue where they'd be seeing higher loss ratios and could spook the market, even though it's only a little bit of a temporary thing. On top of that, it's just logistically challenging to get all the registrations you need to do, because this is a state by state in the insurance world, so it's really complicated.
Yeah.
And
Look
then
how long it's taken Tesla to go beyond California, right?
Yeah, it's not a joke. So a really good friend of mine started his own insurance business. He was an insurance executive for a large company and started his own. And just I was talking to him on a weekly basis, just about like, oh, now we're registered in like Oklahoma. It's like, we whatever other state is just dragging their feet. So it's really hard to do this.
Yeah,
it's a very kind of fractured market. So to kind of get nationwide coverage is not as easy as some people might think that it would be. But I think Lemonade's got a bright future. I think there was a more negative reaction to this current earnings report than should have been. But the other thing I was going to say too is if they expand too rapidly, it's a big drag on their capital. So they're using reinsurers right now to kind of try to be a little bit more capital efficient, so they don't have to underwrite all these policies on their own, because that would essentially blow up their balance sheet with the kind of growth rate that they're seeing. So there's this trade-off right now where in order to grow fast, they need to rely on reinsurers to offload a lot of the capital requirements, which are regulatory. That's another regulatory requirement that they have. But then on what they're saying is in the long term, they want to really reduce the kind of steady state amount of reinsurance that they're doing, so that they can get more of those profits. So there were a lot of headlines about this too, saying revenue's down, I forget what it was, but X% year over year, and that's really almost entirely related to just their reinsurance part of the business. If you look at the in-force premium, that's a much better gauge of kind of the core operations of the business.
All right, let's go to the next question. From Francis 850-16255 on Twitter. What is the biggest risk for Tesla in China in the next decade? I mean, I personally, I'll let Matt answer after me, but my personal risk is, I don't understand China enough, but I do know that the CCP is unique in how it directs its economy, relative to Western cultures. I know, whether it's US or Europe or whatever. And I do think they want to see organic Chinese EV manufacturing success, NIO, XPeng, Huawei now, so I do think the government is doing a lot of what they can, and maybe it's reasonable or maybe it's beyond reasonable to make those companies succeed. And so I do think there's kind of a looming, not threat, but just a looming kind of competition that's sort of unfair competition. Maybe not so much yet, but maybe a little bit behind the scenes now, but it might be even more so as time goes on, when as supply catches up to demand for EVs, in China more and more. So that's my worry, is that Tesla becomes more obsolete in China over time. It still might be like a niche manufacturer. Some people might like the brand, but I'm not sure it's going to be like an Apple success story in China for Tesla. But that's my concern. What do you think, Matt?
Yeah, to be honest with you, I do have some kind of near-term concerns about demand. I mean, the fact that they're exporting so many vehicles right now, and they still have relatively small wait times relative to what we're seeing in the United States. If you go on the Tesla China website, most of the last 18 months, you've been able to get a new Model 3 in 1 to 3 weeks. Whereas in the US, now I think it's like December, maybe it's November, to get a new Model 3 or Model Y. So, they're clearly production constrained right now, but I do think, domestic demand within China is a little bit of a concern. And then, I think like you were saying, Emmett, I do have some just, political concerns. Seeing kind of what happened to Jack Ma from Alibaba, where, he was kind of a vocal, independent voice in China, obviously hugely successful billionaire there, and not sure exactly what happened, but he went out of public eye for a couple months, came back and was like completely muted. There's a whole kind of history of, powerful people in China, being forced to kind of kowtow to the CCP. So there's always that concern out there that they could exert that power on, the leadership of Tesla somehow, or of the plant itself. So it's a risk that's out there, but I don't think even if you were to lose the Chinese market entirely, which I don't think is likely, I still think there's plenty of room for Tesla to grow,
Yes.
worldwide.
I agree. I still think Tesla will be the largest company in the world, even if China disappears for them completely. I think, China has used Tesla and Tesla has used China to both of their benefits up to this point. And if that relationship was to get cut off right now, they both would be better off for having the last few years together anyway. So,
absolutely.
We'll
China's very serious about their clean energy goals. And so I think they kind of want Tesla to succeed in that regard. Obviously, they probably prefer their domestic companies to succeed, but I don't think it's as antagonistic as some people might think it could be.
Yeah. All right, let's go to the next question here. So from Alex V, have you thought of options, opportunities in Tesla suppliers stocks? Oh, that's a great question. I think, Matt, we were just touching base on that the other day.
We were.
Yeah.
So I think you had an idea along this line, right?
Yeah. I mean, I saw some articles about the steel manufacturer, that's kind of building its own gigafactory in Texas right now. It's Steel Dynamics, STLD is the ticker. And that seems interesting to me, just because, when I think of Cybertruck, I think of steel. And if Cybertruck's going to be massively, successful, which I think most people are discounting, except for Tesla nerds like us. No one in Wall Street thinks it's going to sell 1 million Tesla Cybertrucks a year, but we think it probably could, very well could. Imagine the steel supply requirements, and then on top of that, SpaceX, all these giant starships. I mean, aren't they made of steel? Or I think they are.
It's either the same alloy from the Cybertruck or it's very similar.
Yeah. So I would think maybe the same supplier could be used for both. So this STLD, it's like a 12 billion market cap. It's run up a lot the last few months. The stock, I looked at the chart, but it doesn't mean it can't grow to be like a 20 billion market cap company in the near term. I don't know. It's just. I would love to see a dip and take kind of a, drop back down to the 40s. I think it's like $65 or something, but it's come up a lot in the last few months. Maybe there's a lot of people buying on the rumor of it being a big supplier for Tesla or not already. But and then there's lithium suppliers or mining, other metal supply. I really like the idea of going after the suppliers of Tesla, to be honest. I mean, I had long years ago when I worked in prime brokerage sales. I talked about that on Dave's channel. I had a hedge fund client of mine that went from his hedge fund went from 2 or 3 million in assets to 20 or 30 million in assets in 6 months, because he was doing a whole bunch of options on suppliers of Apple during Apple's heyday. He was just buying call options, a little bit on Apple, but mostly on these suppliers, Chinese supplier, other suppliers, and he was picking them and he was visiting their factories, I think, and stuff too, to be boots on the ground himself, and those stocks were just rocking, and he was making a fortune on the call options. So I don't know if that's replicable for Tesla and its suppliers at this point, but it's an attractive play to me, is to look at the key suppliers of Tesla.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's something we probably need to do a little bit more homework on.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Let's go to the next question here. So Dalibor Andrew, question: are you planning on putting on any Delta variant trades? Thanks as always, guys. I don't think we are, right? I mean, we've talked about it.
We should have invested in Moderna about a month ago. We'd be fine.
Yeah. Yeah, Moderna, Man, that thing is killing it. So yeah,
No,
no, we're not doing any.
similar to what we were saying, like we don't think this is going to be a major mover of overall market. So no, I don't think
Yeah.
you wouldn't do anything like you did it last year around like the
No.
COVID crash or anything like that.
No, but it's funny. There was like that one day 2 weeks ago where the stock market dropped like 3 or 4% in one day, and it was sort of like renewed concerns over Delta, like hitting the headlines and everything. And by then, like in the beginning of the day, everything was down 3 or 4%, and the end of the day, everything's were still down. But some of these like stay-at-home stocks, like Roblox and Tesla, and Zoom started recovering to be like near even or up even on the day when everything else was down a lot. And it just reminded me like, hey, we already have a few stocks in our portfolio that are going to do well if there's another lockdown and such.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Anyway, yeah, let's go to the next question here. How is MicroStrategy put call spread working out with the recent rise in Bitcoin? Matt, you want to take this one?
Yeah, so maybe for those who aren't aware, we've had kind of an active strategy around MicroStrategy. Essentially selling puts, and then if we take delivery, then we're selling covered calls on those puts. So we've been doing that for a couple months now. It's worked out really well for us. We've been able to kind of ride the rises and the falls while kind of making decent profits in both situations, while kind of limiting our capital deployed. So it's been a really good strategy. I don't think that the put call spread has necessarily widened. I don't think we've seen that. What we have seen actually is the implied volatility has fallen a little bit, which has hurt the prices a bit. I mean, they're still incredibly high, so the strategy still is working for us. But yeah, no, really, I'm not seeing any significant issue with the spread. What you have seen, which is something that we're really tracking, is the percent of the market cap that's attributable to kind of the balance sheet holdings of Bitcoin. When we started this trade, it was over 90%. So like the entire value of MicroStrategy was basically in its crypto holdings. If you look at enterprise value, it was a little bit less than that, but still a reasonable gauge. Now, I forget the exact number we are right now, but it's closer to like 60-70%, somewhere in that range. So there's been more of a run up in MicroStrategy in the last month or two than there has been in Bitcoin. So this kind of gives us pause, and it's something that we're tracking to see if it gets too disjointed. We don't want to be long MicroStrategy anymore, because even if Bitcoin rises, there could be a bit of a contraction. Yeah. So that's how we're playing it. Any other thoughts on that, Emmett?
Yeah, and just so people know, we're not intentionally going long MicroStrategy. We're actually selling like puts, but it puts us in a position where we could be going long MicroStrategy next time Bitcoin corrects or goes down. Then MicroStrategy go down with it. But when you're selling the puts of MicroStrategy and it's disconnected, like you were saying, then when Bitcoin goes down 5%, MicroStrategy might go down 20%, and then we'd just be really hurt being long MicroStrategy at that price versus. So yeah. So yeah,
I was just going to say, so we're reducing our exposure a little bit due to that, and frankly, just due to the fact that we have some other strategies that we like as well.
Yeah, so I like this guy's YouTube name, Life at 130 beats per minute, BPM. That's pretty good. Like zone 2 training, zone 2 exercise training. That's about where that is. That's good. I think there's a lot of benefits being at that zone 2 level. People push it to much higher all the time, and that's good too. But anyway, that's a cool name.
My legs are sore from my workout this morning.
Next question. From P. Grennan 3. Great show, guys. Any thoughts on the eVTOL space? Any companies you're looking at? So the eVTOL space, I think Tesla's the only one that's going to do it well. I think it's in Elon's mind. I think he really wants to do it. He's over flooded with other things going on. Who knows if and when he'll actually get to it. But I think it's supersonic jet eVTOLs he's focused on, not flying cars. He doesn't like flying cars. He said it a number of times, like what if a hubcap drops in your head, or how noisy it'll be just going, but the supersonic jet eVTOL that zips up really high in the atmosphere pretty quickly, and then once it's high, can just zip around, 500 miles or 700 miles pretty quickly, quicker than any other jet, and get to a destination. I think the capability of the energy for batteries is just about there. Maybe another couple of years, they'll be able to manufacture it kind of at massive scale for that kind of energy density where the cost makes sense to build that type of battery for those jets to succeed. So I think it's in his mind, and I think I think he's got that design. And I think just like the Boring Company, when he first put out his design, I think he open sourced sort of like a design for the Hyperloop, and he was hoping other companies could like, run with it. But Elon's sort of a perfectionist, and and no one's going to do it as good as he does. So, when other companies tried to start designing the Hyperloop based on his open source design, he just realized he better set up his own Boring Company to kind of oversee it. And so I wouldn't be surprised if they make it like a subdivision of Tesla. I asked him in an annual shareholder meeting, 4 or 5 years ago, if it would be if they do it, as a long-term investor, like 10 years out, I said, if they do an eVTOL, down the road, would it be under Tesla or SpaceX? And he kind of thought about it and answered that he thinks it would be under Tesla. So not to say they wouldn't use SpaceX resources, but a lot of people are concerned if it would be a separate entity or under SpaceX. And that's possible, but I think, it would be under Tesla. I don't know. What do you think, man?
Yeah, I agree with everything that you just said. The only thing I would maybe add to that is, for our fund, we, are shooting for really aggressive returns in relatively short amounts of time relative to probably what most other hedge funds are doing. So this to me is something that's a value creation opportunity maybe 5 years from now that would warrant a little bit closer looking, because the development lead time on something like this is probably at least 5 years before it gets any kind of commercial success. And we have no shortage of kind of other ideas that we're highly convicted on that
that's true,
are more near term than this is, more of a longer term option.
Yeah, the SPACs that are setting up, that are in this space, I don't trust them.
Yeah,
I don't know them well enough to be bullish, and that just means stay away from me. Yeah. So
yeah.
From Hassan Investing, thoughts on genomics and genome editing, considering companies like Caribou Biosciences, CRBU are involved in agriculture, livestock. I don't know enough about this space. It's something I definitely have, said I don't know much about. Unfortunately, haven't had the bandwidth to kind of really dive into it. I do like, I think there is a lot of disruption to be done in agriculture and livestock. So Caribou Biosciences may be something to put on my list to study. Matt, do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I'm not familiar with Caribou Biosciences. You and I did have a conversation. There's one genome company. I don't really want to put it out here right now because I want to do a little bit more homework on it before we, really put it out there. But I've got a company that I really like, and I'm trying to understand this space a little bit more. So we'll probably talk more about that one in a future episode.
Yep. All right, next question from B4YN. Question: considering Giga Shanghai is now the main export hub, would selling the lower price model locally cannibalize sales? Wouldn't this rather take market share from cheap competitors?
Well, if assuming they're production constrained, to me, the thing that makes the most sense is to sell the highest margin products, on export to Europe, which seems to be what they're doing. So
maybe India soon too.
Yeah, with that, although they, they slashed that import tariff, but it was still 40%, I think.
Yeah. Did they actually slash it, or just talking about slashing?
I think they're just talking about it, but I think they were talking about bringing it down to 40%, and that'd be like a huge
from
drop.
60%. Yeah, it's something. At least
like that doesn't
some kind of, something to the mix. Maybe that's enough for Tesla to say, okay, we'll try importing some cars there. All right, next question. Let's see. Have you had a look at Pinterest? They're just starting monetizing their user base. My wife uses Pinterest. I've used it in the past. I don't fully understand their business model. I know it's a popular app that people use for a lot of things. I've heard good things, but I haven't studied their stock, to be honest. Have you looked at it yet?
Yeah, no, I haven't either. I mean, I know about Twitter and Shopify is not really in the same realm, but I really like what Shopify is doing as well. I think they're a really interesting company, but I think we've, the market's already moved on that one. But no, Pinterest, I frankly don't know enough about to really comment intelligently.
Yeah, me neither. From Peyton Kalawahea, I think I pronounced it right. Question: thinking of suppliers and developers, do you think of VR being a big mover and possibly investing in companies that will do well? The ATVI, EA, Take-Two of VR. I mean, VR has been a big buzzword thing for 5+ years now. From a big picture point of view, there's still a lot of hurdles, I think, in terms of I have the Quest 2 and other people I know have it. And some people are fine with and like it, but most people I think just like use it a few times and kind of it's like a novelty item, they kind of play with from once in a while, but they're not like addicted to it and using it all the time or every day like their phone. And so for me, like, it gets me a little nauseous if I use some of the game. I don't know. I think there's a lot of hurdles they need to clear. I really like the augmented reality stuff. Snapchat, I feel like is at the forefront of that. But the virtual reality, it's hard to see where that's going in the future. I mean, Facebook obviously is top, and Microsoft are kind of near the top of that. Samsung, you have any thoughts, Matt, on that?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's maybe overhyped relative to I think it will be part of the future. There's no doubt about that. And I really think Snapchat's leading the way in this field. Where you're essentially creating value by being kind of like an online virtual reality kind of marketplace. They're doing some really interesting things in that space that I think have value. But for my mind, thinking about the way that the world is going to change in the next 5 years, 10 years, I think, maybe some retail will shift to VR or AR. But I think the much bigger, so that'll, eat somebody's lunch. But I think the bigger trend that creates value out of thin air is really going to be AI. So that's the wave I want to catch much more so than VR.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so too. All right, let's do one more question maybe from Art Vandalay. Any thoughts on Moderna or
Love that name, by the way. Good Seinfeld reference.
Yeah. Are these two companies in the front runners in mRNA vaccine revolution? How big is the total addressable market? Have you guys looked into this? Moderna, clearly, BioNTech is big. Pfizer's a big part of it. CureVac, that's another potentially big name down the road with mRNA stuff with their 3D printing. I know Tesla or Elon's been involved with CureVac a little bit, so that's good to keep on your radar when he's touching the company, I think.
And they just got hit when their vaccine wasn't approved, so they're potentially a little bit on the cheap end now.
Yeah, they come back already somewhat. So the total addressable market is probably much bigger than it is today. It's an industry I'm not an expert in. I just know that the trend the world is going in is sort of in that direction, I think. And the next time we have, we've seen with this COVID thing get out of control with the media and lockdowns. I think a lot of it is with the internet sensationalism, clickbait, business model. And in the future, it's going to be even more so. So next time we have like a bird flu epidemic of some sort, we'll see more alertness and probably a quicker mRNA vaccine rollout, and people want to all take the bird flu vaccine or something quickly, or it's just going to be every few years there's going to be some like new vaccine. I wouldn't be surprised. And so in that case, I do think these mRNA technology companies could grow to be much bigger in time. But I don't know for sure. That's just my thought.
Yeah, I think they will be. My concern as an investor is just that, I think we've already missed the boat on some of these. I mean, Moderna in particular just had a spectacular run up lately. It's added to the S&P recently. It's like $150 billion market cap, I think, right now. Yeah. And I was just looking at their financials. I mean, their revenue the trailing 12 months is only $7 billion. So, I mean, they're trading at, like a 30x revenue multiple, somewhere in that neighborhood. So, in looking at this as like a 5x opportunity, I don't think Moderna kind of fits that qualification. Yeah. Maybe I'm wrong, but to me, there's probably better risk reward opportunities out there for the type of investment that we're looking in.
Yeah. All right. One more question. Let's do one more. All right. Last question is, what do you think of Coinbase earnings? Coinbase, yeah, today.
Yeah, we'll find out after close, I think.
We'll find out after close. I mean, I think it's just recently IPO'd. It took a big hit after its IPO. I don't think, I think a lot of people are kind of staying away, waiting to see, kind of taking the waiting to see attitude before portfolio managers decide on what to do about Coinbase, if they're going to invest or not. Like, so institutions, once they see this next marker, of earnings and projections going forward, I think they'll be more likely to pick up a piece of Coinbase in their portfolios, and it could drive the stock up. But there also has been a run up in the last, few weeks of Coinbase, I believe. So maybe there's a lot of buying the rumor going on with Coinbase into this earnings, and there'll be some offsetting with people selling on the news if it's good earnings. I mean, I think if the earnings are not up to expectation for some reason, I think the stock sells off hard. That's one thing for sure, I'd say. But I assume it's going to beat whatever the Wall Street consensus is, I would think. I don't know what the whisper number is, so to speak. I guess there's a company called Estimize does something like pretty good tracking of like the whisper number, so I have to check that. But if they really beat the whisper number, the stock could take another run up after this. We'll see. It's hard to say, but it's one of those stocks that it's going to be volatile potentially, because it's still Wall Street. The market is still trying to figure out how to value this thing, I think.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, it's almost like Wall Street's just throwing darts at this right now, because they did the direct listing right when they had those stellar, Q1 numbers.
Yes.
So they had, I forget what it was, just like outstanding, like crazy growth. It was something like hundreds of percent, of growth in that
incredible
one quarter.
margins. Yeah.
Yeah, incredible margins. And so the commentary from Wall Street was, okay, well, these margins are not sustainable and the growth isn't either. And they just so happened to kind of time the direct listing right when Bitcoin was like at I think it was over 60,000. It was somewhere in that neighborhood.
Yeah.
It was at least very close to that. So there's at least a reasonable chance that the trading volumes have decreased in Q2. But to my mind, and in fact, you saw that with Square. Square, I think, had their Bitcoin related revenue decrease a little bit in Q2 relative to Q1. So, and that's consistent with what I think Wall Street is estimating. There's a decrease in expected EPS even on comparable revenues. So that certainly could be the case. But the interesting thing to me is that if you look at the forward multiples of Coinbase, the market is already discounting their margin potential going forward. I mean, they're assuming that that Coinbase is going to have to lower their fees, and that earnings are going to, basically steadily decline for the next couple of years. So they're pricing it not as a growth stock, but as as like a declining value entity, which could prove wrong. And if they're wrong on that, then that's huge upside potential in the long term, I think. So I'm really curious to see how Coinbase, reacts not only this quarter, but kind of going forward. And then they also need to kind of diversify away from, essentially just getting trading fees, which they're doing some things. One thing, sorry, I don't mean to keep going on this, but I was looking at their earnings questions on Say, and like the single highest voted question by like an order of magnitude was, are you going to start offering NFTs on Coinbase? Wow. Which you can imagine if they did that. Like I personally don't know how to buy an NFT. I don't think I'd want to, even if I did.
Some mask wallet or something. Yeah, you need some weird wallet.
Yeah, but
MetaMask.
I don't know. NFTs are not something that I think the average consumer knows how to purchase. And what I think Coinbase did for the average consumer is let them buy cryptocurrency kind of with confidence in having it be like a normal brokerage experience. So I think they've got a really well-positioned niche within the industry of kind of being that credible, safe way to enter the crypto space. And I think the way they can expand that is by offering things like NFTs and more kind of derivatives and trading and things like that. So I'm very curious to see how their business model evolves over time. And I think that's one of the things I'm going to be really listening for on today's call.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think the Coinbase thing, they have this first mover advantage in the US especially, but I do think FTX is going to become the biggest worldwide exchange. It might not be licensed in the US, for a long time or ever, but I still think their technology is probably dominant. But that doesn't mean Coinbase is not the most dominant exchange in the world, can't be a multi-$100 billion market cap company eventually, or 100, so, we'll see what happens. But yeah, Coinbase, I'm very eager to see what their earnings are and how Wall Street or how the market reacts. We say Wall Street, but now it's not really, it's just like all these different players. You have meme traders, you have, day traders, you have high frequency trading firms, you have global Chinese traders in the US market, probably, you have all kinds of players. It's not just like traditional firms on the physical Wall Street, New York, driving stock prices,
Yeah, it's so true. I mean, like, I was just looking, AMC and GameStop are still at these kind of crazy levels that I just assumed they would have to sell off from. But the investors aren't selling. So that's like GameStop's a $12 billion company still, and AMC's at $17 billion. They're $33 right now.
Yeah.
So
I mean, the one thing I thought about GameStop is like, what if Ryan Cohen, who's like on the board or chair, he's like the main reason people started loving GME when he came on their board. But what if he just somehow decided like, hey, we're gonna make GameStop stock like the new cryptocurrency token. We promise we'll never issue one more share. And so when you own our stock, it's symbolic, and you can, it's like crypto Bitcoin, but it's held in your brokerage account. Because we promise, we're guaranteeing we'll never issue another share, and our business will do our best to keep it more than profitable, so it could have some kind of underlying value. But then, with all the momentum around the GameStop narrative, could that become like a symbol for the new digital gold, like GameStop stock? I don't know. It's a wild theory I've thrown out there as a possible parallel universe outcome. I don't know if it'll happen here. Yeah.
I do think there will be some sort of trade. Tesla was listed on one of those crypto trading. There's some sort of derivative that's based in crypto where you can trade Tesla shares 24/7, even over the weekend now. I haven't dug into that too much, but to me, that's one of the interesting promises of the crypto world, which frankly has yet to be proven that it can be done, reliably. And there's concerns like Tether and a couple other things that you kind of need a lot of this infrastructure to enable, this transition to the kind of a crypto digital financial system. But I do think that there's a lot of promise in some of these if they can pan out. But we'll see.
Or maybe he'd say like, we only issue 10% shares dilution over the next 10 years. That's the maximum. We'll write it into the law
but
of our company.
It's written into like a non-changeable bit of code.
Yeah, something that people are confident would be the case. And I don't know, that could be, so I think of with Bitcoin, like I've been thinking a lot about it, like cryptocurrencies to me is just like a roundabout way to get people into investing, in a different way. But once cryptocurrencies kind of like at their maximum potential, which they will inevitably at some point, they're not just going to go forever. There will be some maximum potential, and then their stocks eventually will outperform cryptocurrencies because stocks have underlying businesses that are producing goods and services. Cryptocurrencies do not, So you would think at some point the sentiment would flip back to investing in stocks by everyone who's been a crypto investor primarily up to this point. Well, we'll see.
Yeah, no, it's going to be interesting to see how it changes. That is one of the things about Ethereum that I think is a little bit different, is that there's a lot of the functionality kind of built into that, as opposed to Bitcoin, where it's clearly like a store of value. So, we're in the early days still, so it's just going to be fascinating to watch how this all pans out. It's a fun time to be an investor, though, that's for sure.
Yeah. Great. Well, it's been a great episode with you, Matt. We just crossed, I think, a little over an hour and 15 minutes almost. So we'll end it here. And next week we'll be chatting, fresh off Roblox earnings and, macro market news and Tesla's latest updates. So we'll look forward to chatting with you all next week as well.
Yeah. Thanks for watching, everyone. We'll see you next week.
Yep. Thanks.